All right then. Well, I think it's about time, so we can start the session. So first, the question is: are there any questions from the audience about HDF before we move on for the scheduled programming?
I was weeping yesterday when I saw that auto tools were removed.
Um,
There was
yes,
shaking from, right.
yes.
We'll see what will happen.
I think we're planning a wake, virtual wake for Auto Tools sometimes later.
Yeah, I'm one of your mourners.
Yes.
Not quite out yet. You get another minute or two, But yeah.
Yeah. So any questions? So any questions? Um, I see a new person, and I was told there are questions about HDF. So
Sorry.
Lori,
Yeah, that was me. I said something. So last week, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name for sure, but I think we had the planned programming with Anthony last week and maybe you didn't get a chance to ask your question. You could put it in the chat or unmute and ask, but if you have anything, feel free to let us know. Alexander will move on and feel free to put that in the chat and we can address it at the end too.
Okay. All right. So the plan was for me to talk about two things. So I'll start with about the filters. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because recently there's been some work, or let's say effort, to 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 update and make it more official the information about registered HDF5 filter plugins. So very briefly, what's HDF5 filter plugin? Well, let's say that there is some software out there, either written by a person or some third party that could do some kind of transformation when writing out a buffer with chunk data to an HDF5 file. I'm trying to be very generic here. So that software could become an HDF5 filter if someone writes an HDF5 filter plugin for it, so that the HDF5 library could use that software and basically include it in that pipeline of transformation as the chunk bytes go through being written into the HDF5 file. And so the filter plugin is essentially the interface between the HDF5 library and that software that does something. Most typically, typically in HDF5, those filters were used for compressing the data, not exclusively, but mostly. And so sometimes people equate filters with compression of data, but that's not really the case. They can do other things, and there are some filters that do not do compression, that do some preparation of the chunk bytes that may help and enhance compression. But as I said, compression is just the most common and the most popular thing that these filters are for. So this document that you're looking at is essentially now the official record of all the filter plugins that are registered with the HDF group. And the thing I wanted to highlight now mostly is that not only that this is the list of the currently registered ones, but that as of yesterday, we started showing in this document also information of the parameters that these filter plugins pass to the filters and what they mean and what they're used for. So previously, this document lacked this type of information. And I thought that was one of the biggest deficiencies of this document. So yes, it's good and great that you register filter plugin and that filter plugin registration gives you this number that's called filter identifier. It's very important. However, what's also very important from the data management or if you will, open science and fair data use point of view is actually that people know and be very explicit is what are the filter plugin parameters that are being passed to the filter, and because they control how the data how the chunk bytes are actually going to be transformed. And for example, as one of the most elaborate examples, this is the ZFP filter. This is again one of the compression methods. However, as you can see here, this information now in these tables is what's new in this document. This is now very specific and precise description of what are the parameters that are being passed to the ZFP library and what they do and what they mean. What are the applications of this new information? Well, first of all, very recently, there is now software that reads HDF5 files and doesn't use HDF5 library. And so it is very important for that software to understand exactly how the chunk bytes, as they are stored in HDF5 files, are being transformed so that they can employ the same libraries like ZFP in their own way to decode those chunk bytes when they're reading them. And this is absolutely valuable information for them. Also, the other way is that, again, we are now living at times where things have to be open science and fair data. So for the posterity, you need to declare these things to be as accessible and as transparent as possible. And this is another benefit of doing this. And so going forward, I think any future filter plugin that's going to be registered with HDF Group will have to upfront provide all this information so that this document can be properly updated. Again, just recording that here's my repository where the filter plugin is, and that filter plugin uses that filter, and that's it. It's not going to be anymore enough. This new information has to be provided as well. And that's basically the main point I wanted to highlight here. Other than that, there have been some updating as far as formatting. We are now moving more to Markdown, not HTML and other things, but fundamentally, this document is enhanced by this added information about these parameters. I don't want to go into detail what the CD values really is. It's part of the HDF5 filter plugin API. Who wants to read about this? At the beginning of the document, there are some links, for example, to HDF5 documentation here that kind of walks you through it, what needs to be done and how to define these things. As you can see, there's the CD value mentions here. But I just wanted to say that from now on, the registered plugin document, which is here, I'm showing again, is going to be much more tightly tied to the actual filter information, not just be used to show the identifiers for the filter plugins, and that's it. So that's that. Any questions?
Yes, maybe not question, but improvement request. It will be very helpful, and I think it's a long-standing one. If every compression, or or if possible, to include type of data on which this compression works really well and in which it doesn't work well. So having example as a new user, I will look at which compression I should use and kind of compare it. And by the way, I don't know how we characterize this data. Probably someone will know. But it will be very helpful in choosing the method.
Joe Lee raised his hand.
So you know why CD values are called the CD values? CD, what does a CD mean?
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember.
Compression data values.
Yeah, something like that.
And we are going away with the new APIs if we finally implement them, where that parameter will be improved.
Yes, those new APIs are good.
Well, that going back to Elena's comment, yeah, I agree. I mean, that will also be very good additional information. Not that can be added later, or we can contact the authors and try to ask them this question, and hopefully they'll all reply. The other also thing I failed to mention is not every filter here has this new information, because finding that takes some time and effort. But eventually, I'm hoping iteratively we'll come back and do as much as possible. One of the examples is bit shuffle. I try to read its filter plugin code, but there are too many ifs. If this is that value, then that other value means this or that. So I have to probably contact the author and ask him if he knows this information, so save some time. But yeah, as you see, for example, bit shuffle doesn't have this new information yet. So there are and other filters, obviously the same situation. So we'll see how many of them we can really update. But I think right now it's really valuable, given that, again, as I said, HDF library now is not the only reader of chunk bytes in those files, and so it becomes even bigger and more important information, not just for the HDF5 library itself. So all right, so that is that for the registered filter document. So we can, if no questions, I can close it and move further. So the other topic I want to talk about is there was a well, not so recent, 2 months ago, there was a post on HDF Forum about a user who was using HDF View, and he was viewing an HDF5 dataset that was essentially storing tabular data. And that user was asking what they can do to sort of see more information here, as not like just time and foo 1 and foo 2. They wanted to have a bit more richer metadata, if you will, displayed here. And they tried to guess some things and tried to do some things, but it didn't work. And so that raised some discussion in the following couple of days. Here's me saying that some of the attempts that this user tried with some of the attributes here was really not part of the what's called H5TB, which is, I'm just going to mention. Well, maybe now it's time to mention it. So what HDF5, well, sorry, what HDF View was showing here, at least, I think it was recognizing something that's called HDF5 table specification. And I don't know when it was designed, but and I don't know how much it was really promoted, but it does exist, and it tries to give some, if you will, light convention on top of HDF5 for storing tabular data. And description is here. There are a bunch of attributes that are being used to recognize that there is a tabular data and everything else. And as you can see, there are some of these attributes that you can see displayed here, like field to fill and field to name and field fill, that are basically been, I think, honored in HDF View. But what user asked was not supported by this specification. And this is what I answered to the user here. And then after that, there was a kind of a light discussion here, if, you know, it would be good to extend the table specification in some way to include more capabilities, more metadata, according to what this user wanted to display. And as I said, we kind of discussed this, and then I dropped the ball really and never really followed through since mid-January to continue this discussion. So I feel a little bad about that. But I just wanted to mention this because I think there are now not only this issue in the forum that kind of shows that regardless of internally in HDF group, people think about these light conventions. My experience is users really tend to follow some reasonable advice how to store their data in HDF5. And I think this would be a good opportunity to revive this H5 table specification and try to extend it in a reasonable way to be able to perhaps do what this user was hoping it can do. But I also think, coming back, there is another need that I think is even more interesting from the HDF5 point of view, and that is columnar approach to storing tabular data. There is a lot of interest now in ways to store tabular data that is much more, well, it is much more faster for analysis of tabular data. And I think in that sense, HDF5 lacks anything like HDF5 table specification, because this specification is really row oriented versus the column oriented. And I think that would be an interesting thing to think about going forward that the company should do. Because now there are other data formats like Parquet, for example, just to mention something that comes to my mind immediately. DuckDB is also another one that are really making a lot of popular. They're getting very popular because they're promoting this idea that data is stored per column, therefore that much more easier to compress and other things, and access per columns is much easier and whatnot and whatnot. And I think that HDF5 is missing in that game. Not that HDF5 is specifically designed for tabular data, but I think there is something that also HDF5 could be used in that sense, and I think that would be nice that the company does something about it in that way. And so as far as this post goes, the issue was how to extend this additional information for the tabular specification. One of the things that seems to be needed is the units for the column data. And when I'm thinking about this current table specification, which is, as I said, row oriented, which means that HDF5 attributes don't really apply to a specific column. They kind of apply to entire tables. So that's why you have to go through these constructs of field, some number, and then something. So effectively name, just the name part is actually the real attribute to the column, and the field part is the actual attribute to the real column. I'm thinking how we can connect this old table specification, row oriented, with perhaps something that should come that will be column oriented. And I just wanted to mention this and highlight it here. It would be nice if more people commented on this forum post so that we get a little bit more feedback, what people think about these ideas and where would they like to go from here. But I just wanted to highlight for this talk, did this forum post, and hopefully someone may respond. And that's basically all I have. Any questions?
Yeah, actually, I have, it's not a question, it's more historical historical note. So this table specification was created to facilitate storage of one-dimensional arrays of compound data types. And that's why you cannot extend it, because we cannot extend compound data type and add new field to data type. It was like mid-2000, I believe, when it was created, and you already see the deficiencies like attribute name, class version may collide with some other definitions, so it should be more specific and so on. So for attributes, there was a request to add attributes to each field of the compound data type. So this is more general than just to columnar storage. It's really annotating each field. And idea was with columnar data that you can use proper chunking to store your columns, and have efficient access to them. But yes, having more specialized storage will help with the columnar data as people think about it. And
Right.
it should not the headache of how do I set this chunk size to for good performance. It should be more easy for the users. But this is absolutely, and there are APIs, high-level APIs to create compound create tables in the high-level library. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I think you're right, actually, even here, that's the,
Right. So it's high level. I don't think they will support it. Something under construction, right? But there are Forum and C API. So this is C API. And people use that. There was also, Quincy, do you remember what it was? It was appending the table, right? There are APIs to append the table, mean appending records.
It looks like it, yeah.
Yeah.
and
So,
records.
right. So, and they were kind of over the years improved in terms of performance. They are not bad, but definitely not well performed as they could be.
Right. Alex, you mentioned a couple of other aspects to this. Elena's covered a couple, but you know, separating out the notion of how do you store it as columns, right, can apply to multi-dimensional data as well. And it doesn't look exactly like columns in that sense as planes or volumes or something as well. But that's the obvious extension in HDF5 land to bring it down into the storage place and not tie it to, this is a table. And also units. We've covered how they extend HDF5 for units like 4 different times, right? And just no one has ever funded that proposal. What they really need to be is, I believe, the design that we've always suggested and seemed sane was to add a concept like an attribute onto data types so that the description of the values carries the unitness. And that's what those values are for that data type is meters or kilos or whatever. That would apply across tables as well as everything else in the library. And that would be a uniform, easy to describe for everyone, everywhere solution, I think.
That I think that was one of your revolutionary improvements to scientific data management, that approach, that you assign unit to a data type.
Right.
Because right now everyone is using some kind of a string into some kind of an attribute that usually is called units, but could be a bunch of other things. But yes, and that's not ideal.
Yeah, exactly. And if we did it in some way, if someone at some point either contributed that for the good of the community or provided funding so that the HDF group or someone else could implement it, that would, like you say, really, really step up the game for users of HDF5.
Quincy, didn't we even have RFC written on this?
I just scanned in those from about 1999. Yeah.
Yeah, there was, actually there was, it's kind of more philosophical question here or design, because HDF5 was designed as agnostic to this thing. So it's up to the user. So how it should be implemented in the library or as addition to the library or is like convention, because we know that CF conventions work well. So there are many arguments and it's really not an easy thing to even to design. And
right, we don't have to mandate, but we can provide an example as well as the mechanism for attaching a description of a unit to the data type itself. And as long as we can get there, then the users can run with the ball and implement lots of stuff on top of that.
but it's better to have some standards so then tools can comply. And then if you comply to the standard, tools will work, right? That was another problem.
Right, there's several levels of semantic benefit, yes.
Lose, and then you have different standards for units. And this is where nightmare starts.
Well, yeah, but still, you have the standard, the SA units, and you have the 7 fundamental units.
Yeah, but that's not
that's
sufficient, because how do you represent Hermitians and tensors? You know, we get off into dimension land really fast.
I mean, one thing that would really benefit this solution is the attributes, because right now with attributes,
Yeah, they had just
it's
some way
so
to
messy
attach
because
something to a
yeah,
type would be really beneficial.
yeah. With data sets, you can get away because you attach an attribute. Say, what does the units? But with attributes, what is the units? So it's a messier.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't work well for compounds and data sets either, right? Because
Right.
you know, 14 fields and you got to figure out what goes where.
All right. Well, we touched even the SA unit system and physical units, so that
Yeah.
was even an added bonus for this session. So, any questions? Again, about any HDF5 stuff?
Alexandra, just back on to the units. Maybe you should open a discussion on GitHub, right? How it's done now, and ask people to submit their use cases so we can see how people want to use units together this to get better understanding before we start any conversation.
I mean, we can, but I can tell you, people, I think what we just discussed, this comes from a much deeper understanding of the issue and that kind of is unique to HDF Group. I mean, a lot of people, I'm aware of one proposal that has not been funded because the comment was, well, we have a units attribute for it, that this is a solved problem. What's the problem? And again, and I would argue that's not the solved problem. You just don't understand this issue enough
Well,
on the right level.
if the proposal had those use cases, they will not have this argument to show that that problem is not resolved. That's why it's good to have how users use it. And we can ask during HUG, it may be one of the topics for discussion to find out, because they are storing, like XFL, they are storing data from physical experiments and then physical data reduced from those experiments. They definitely storing some units or maybe not. It's good to know how they're dealing and what will facilitate their life,
The
I've got
Nexus,
docs from 25 years ago I can throw somewhere.
Yeah, it will be good to have that place, and maybe it will get traction at some point.
for the Nexus format,
If science is still alive in this,
yeah.
Yeah.
I recently looked at the Nexus data format, which is, I think, what
Right.
those they're using the units attribute, and they are referring actually the UD unit software, which is the Unidata's software for unit conversion, as essentially the vocabulary for units as strings.
Right. And do you know who guided them to that solution? It was HDF Group, because
Probably. No,
yeah,
that's fair. That's
we
fair. That's fine. But again, this is again the same idea. The string, some kind of string that defines the units. The data type approach with this SA fundamental units thing would basically say you use your whatever software you want for your units. I'm just going to tell you how you can construct the definition of the unit for this data type, and then plug it into your software to get whatever string representation you want. For example, if that's your thing. So that's why I think this approach is much more fundamentally solid and right than just string valued units. But anyway, that's another discussion. So I think I'm done here, unless again people want to bring some other issue and talk about it. I think we can wrap it up. Thanks very much to Quincy and Elena for historical background. It added the depth to this recording. And next week would be someone else from the company, I think.
John Reedy, because you guys traded, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. It will be John, who's an expert in cloud as well. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.